Suit up, strap in, warm the tires, and leave on yellow. Time for the MitsuTimes podcast, presented by MitsuTimes.org, the home of the fastest Mitsubishi cars. With your host, Josh.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Josh from MitsuTimes. Today, my guest is Mr. Charles Spaz Miller. He is the owner and driver of one of the coolest looking Time Attack Evos out there. How are you doing today, sir?
I am doing all right. How about yourself?
I am doing very well. The weather's been nice. Getting some work done on the cars. It's been a good weekend so far.
Always good to hear. I'm waiting for an engine to get done, and next event's in 2 weeks, so we'll see if we make that. But yeah, it's been good to work on what I can on the car so far.
Got a little bit of a scramble in your hands.
Yeah. It happens.
Yeah.
Every year.
Well, tell us about the setup on the Evo when it does have an engine in it.
All right. Well, I'll actually run down the list of, once we are race ready this year, what we're going to be looking at.
Perfect. There we go.
That engine, thankfully, being a Minneapolis resident, I'm very, very close to RS Motors. I'm sure plenty of listeners are at least somewhat familiar with Ronnie and the work that he does. But it's going to be a RS Motors 2.2 liter stroker. It's one of it's a special build that Ronnie does on the race side of things. The pistons are a completely custom CP unit that it's custom enough that it's actually got RS Motors engraved right into the top of the piston.
Oh, wow.
So it's only way to get one of these engines is through Ron. Beyond that, we're making the jump this year to a Haltech 2500 Elite.
Nice.
The class that I race in, which is a Grid Life Street class. Limits me to a stock turbo. They actually use the Evo turbo as the benchmark turbo for the upper limit of what you could put on a car. So we're stuck, for better or worse, with a stock turbo, but it's kind of for the better. These things are bulletproof, and
yeah.
It's everyone knows how good the 9 turbo is.
Yep.
Beyond that, upgraded intercooler and piping. Finally, last year made the jump to a Vangean clamp setup, because so you start blowing couplers off, and it starts eating into track time, and costs you more money than it saves at the end of the day. So did that last year. It's got a 3-inch turbo back on it. Fueling is just a classic Walbro 255 1100cc injector combo for E85, and as things sit there, once everything's back together and running, we're hoping to get it into the mid-high 300s at 25 pounds, which is also a class limitation on a local Heartbreaker Mustang dyno. So fingers crossed we can pull that out of the car. Moving further toward the wheels, driveline, transmission is stock outside of a PAR straight cut 4th gear, just because, as I'm sure you and plenty of listeners are aware, the 4th gear is a weak point in the 5-speed Evo Trans, especially when you're on track. The clutch, our Lord and Savior, the Exedi HD Twin. They wouldn't have it any other way. And then T-case and rear diff are both TRE built units with ATS hybrid carbon 1.5 ways in them. So front rear differential are fancy boys.
Very.
The not cheap, but very, very worth it. That's I'm not gonna lie. The inspiration for that setup was the Escort Evo over in Japan. Fire Ando hitting taking 3rd fastest lap at Tsukuba, and it's the exact same setup.
Wow.
So I had to take some inspiration there. It's like, well, if I can do it, I should do it.
Yep.
Any little competitive edge, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. You gotta scratch and get every little inch you can.
Yep. Well, especially in a mature rule set. This class has been an actual competitive place since about 2018 was when things really started to step up, and had to everybody's having to find every inch that they can, and that actually segues really well into suspension. This year, it's my first year in a relationship with Motion Control Suspension.
Oh, wow.
Out of Georgia, and we've got their two-way remote reservoir dampers going on the car here sometime hopefully between now and 2 weeks from now. I've got the SSB Designs drop knuckles, and by the end of the season, we'll have both their caster adjustable lower front control arm and their rear trailing arm on the car as well. And then from there, just pretty basic sway bar and alignment arm setup, just to make sure we can get everything where we need it for dial-in handling perspective. Brakes are actually a stock size, stock caliper, and just some added cooling. Was running some 3-inch ducts on the car up until we did the drop knuckles and had to change the setup a bit. Right now I just have some Porsche GT3 brake air guides zip tied to the front control arms, but eventually we're going to be 3D scanning, doing some additional modeling, and basically producing a modified 3D printed factory brake scoop setup that plays nicer with the drop knuckles and gets more air directly into the caliper than the basic stock setup would. So I'm excited to start working on that. That'll be a project over the next month here. And then Frozen Rotors supplies us with cryo-treated blanks for the rotors, and that really helps with longevity. I can actually get full seasons out of a set of rotors that way. Otherwise, we're normally cracking them. And then pad choice depends on track. It's nice to have options to a track like Gingerman Raceway in Michigan. Your typical cornfield Midwest racetrack is going to be very different on brakes than someplace like Road America, where you've got 350 mile an hour braking zones every 4 miles. So yeah, we swap stuff around depending on where we're going, just to make sure everything's happy and as drivable as possible. Wheel setup. I'm on Enkei NTO 3 Plus M's in an 18 by 10.5 plus 30. So a fairly standard Evo setup, but also fairly wide. And class limits me to a 255 wide tire, so we're on the Bridgestone RE71 RS, new for this year. We were previously working with Falcon, but again, it's that finding every inch.
Right.
So, and that's part of why we've got a 255 on such a wide tire. It's not as big of a stretch as it sounds like, and it stiffens up the sidewalls just enough to get the tire to act a little bit more compliance. You have less sidewall squirm, so it's a more direct feeling input. And we did some back-to-back testing of this setup versus my old setup, which was a 17 by 9, and we actually at Pikes Peak International Raceway over a 1 and 2 second lap were 1.3 seconds faster in data on the on the stretch setup versus a square setup.
Holy cow!
So that sealed the deal on that, and we've been running a similar setup to that ever since. Interior, fairly simple. We've got a 4-point half cage from Artsum Fab, local guy who does absolutely amazing work out of his own garage. Racetech supplied us with a Halo seat, and then I've got some harnesses in there to keep me in place. Obviously running a Hans on the helmet, all of that fun stuff. Just because at the end of the day, the more complete of a system you have, the safer you're going to be.
For sure. You got quite the setup.
Yeah, well, I've been at it for been time attacking for this year a decade. So.
Oh wow. Who did the wrap design? Because I just think that is so cool, so eye catching.
So the wrap design was actually done by a former title sponsor. The company actually no longer exists.
Oh, okay.
But that was an unfortunate proceeding earlier this year. But the idea behind the wrap design was as that company expanded their motorsports program, it would allow people to take their city, or a city of their choice, be it where they live, their hometown, whatever, and slap it on a car. So that's actually a roadmap with the city of Minneapolis, downtown Minneapolis
No
is
kidding.
on my hood, and then it's. And unless you know what it is, it looks like a bunch of random lines, and it still looks cool, but like it's got that extra level of weight that actually is something.
I thought for sure it was just a mess of random lines that just looked cool.
Yeah, no, it was a great design element, and we took it and ran with it, and the former CEO of that company, he had an Evo 10, and his car looked similar, and so we took and we changed the colors up and made it something that stands out more on track. And he would always say, it's between the two cars, yours looks better. It's not even close. And like any time we'd go out and do photo shoots and that type of stuff, photographers are like you outdid yourself on Spaz's car. So it's been really well received. Thankfully, all of the branding and logos on the car are a separate layer. So we are going to be rebranding the car this year, but it's since as stated, title sponsor no longer exists, but we'll be able to keep the base livery and just get that stuff off there, slap everything new on, and
Well, that's cool.
keep looking good.
I can picture the Evo 10 in my head now, and I guess I just never connected the dots that they were connected, even though obviously the same company was on the side. Just because yours looks so different, I guess.
Well, that was the goal. We wanted something that stood out, that popped, that got attention, because setting respectable times on a racetrack is one thing, but if you're not drawing attention in the paddock, drawing attention on social media, like you're only doing like a third of what matters if you're trying to run a successful program.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about what got you into time attack racing in the first place.
So I've always had a thing for cars, like from being a kid. It's cars were always just my deal, but time attack and I really didn't click until Forza. I think it was Forza Motorsport 3. And I just kind of got tired of, I was getting to a point where I was playing online more, and I got tired of dealing with the Forza lobby problem. And it's anyone who's played Forza knows exactly what I'm talking about. People ramming, or you get into a lobby and you're trying to have fun, and it's a bunch of people running like cracked meta cars, and and there's only so much fun you can have in a Forza lobby, and that led me to kind of down the rivals mode and chasing leaderboard times, which is time attack in the virtual world. And so as I went down this rabbit hole, it led me to poking around on forums, because those still existed back in the day, and finding setups for time attack in various cars, and you'd get people that went the whole 9 yards, where here's the tune and here's a livery that you can run with it, that it's supposed to kind of mimic this famous time attack car. And so that introduced me to the AMS car, that Evo 8, that was kind of a bastard. They ran it in like any motorsport that they could that was on tarmac over the course of that car's life as a shop car. And so that it got me excited about them and what they were doing. Same thing with the Sierra Evo. It's I learned about cars like that through Forza, and then you start digging online, and they're in magazine articles, and you as a gamer you see crazy stuff like Chris Rado's Scion TC that had the wing on the giant wing on the back and then a giant wing on the front, and he was in Need for Speed games. And it's you looked at all of these crazy cars with these crazy builds. They were setting these really impressive lap times across the world, and it was just like, you couldn't help but have a ton of respect for what these guys were doing, because it's Time Attack at the unlimited level has always been like out of the box. Like, you're doing every little possible crazy thing you can for tenths of a second, and it was just so cool to me, like the min-maxing that these guys were doing on these cars. And then, being from Minnesota, it eventually that led me to cross paths with Ryan Gates, and him running the 311 RS program with his Evo 10, and then eventually building a line of them for limited sale and all of that fun stuff. And Ryan at the time, he was a real celebrity in the Redline Time Attack series. He was working with AMS. He was in magazines. He was writing for Sport Compact Car. Like, it's this dude was as legend as you're gonna meet on the street. And so, I got to meet him at a local meet and just, chatting with him. And it's like, wait, this is just like a normal dude. Like, sure, he's got access to funding, but he's still just like a normal dude. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm a normal dude. So if he can race in Time Attack, then I can probably race in Time Attack. And so that's what led me down, eventually getting a car on track. And at the time, that was my first Evo, which was an Evo 8, and ended up not running an adequate brake fluid. Boiled the brakes up at Brainerd International Raceway and put that car into the wall and rode it off, and ended up buying my 9. And then as soon as I bought my 9, I got serious. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to listen to everything that everybody around me says. I'm going to throw people in my passenger seat, and I'm going to learn to go fast. And not 12 months later, I'm running standing start time attacks and bringing home trophies at Brainerd. And So I was like, oh, this is fun. This is where I wanted to be, but I also want to see how much further I can go. And yeah, that just turned into the rabbit hole that got me to where I am now.
That's so cool. What a journey it's been.
Indeed.
I know a lot of people kind of frown upon NASCAR, but there's currently a NASCAR driver right now that kind of has a similar story. I don't know if you're familiar.
Which driver?
William Byron. He started out in in iRacing, and I just think that is such a cool story because obviously we didn't have the technology years ago, but to see someone not come from kart racing and stuff like everybody else does, but to come from virtual racing to being at the leader, top 5, top 10 every single week, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a sign of the times that, if you really, really want to put in the work outside of the real world, it can make you successful in the real world if you get the right opportunities and you push for those opportunities. And I mean, you still have to be able to get the attention of the right people, but, at the end of the day, just, having a hobby where you sit down in a chair with a wheel and play a computer game, it's, I hate to call iRacing a computer game because it is definitely a simulation, like through and through. But at the end of the day, it's you're literally sitting there playing a computer game, and it's, eventually, if you apply yourself enough, get good enough, like that can lead to opportunity in the real world.
It's pretty cool to see.
Oh yeah.
So what was this Evo 9 like when you first picked it up?
So This car, when I picked it up, I'm a sucker for cars with stories. Also, it was cheap, but I'm a sucker for cars with stories. So the car use or I should say the chassis used to be a 900 wheel horsepower highway car. Like it was built by the second owner, or it was built by Buescher for the second owner as a clone of the Bad Bish.
Oh, wow.
At the time. And the second owner was a buddy of mine, military guy, had gotten out and then went back on a deployment as a civilian contractor, and so he basically deployed for 9 months and made well into the six figures. And so during this period, he called his dad from Iraq and was just like, "Hey, can you just drop the car off at Buescher in Ohio?" And he came back to a running, driving 900 wheel horsepower car.
Wow.
And so he had his fun with the car. I got to ride in it a few times. It's an absolutely life-changing experience, that much power. And he eventually got bored with it because it didn't try to kill him enough. And so he was toying with the idea of selling it, and then he launched fourth gear on the stage 4 Shep Trans that was in it. And so he had that rebuilt, and then 2 weeks later it ate third. And he just at that point decided, nope, I'm going to try to sell it as is. Didn't sell as is, so he parted it out. And another buddy of mine picked up the shell and reverted the car to, or basically rebuilt the car as a bone stock Evo 9. So like untouched engine out of a totaled car out of Chicago. Transfer case came out of that same car. Source to rear diff, all of that fun stuff. Basically threw together this bone stock car, left the coilovers on it. So it was literally a stock Evo on coilovers, and that was it. That was how I picked up the car. So perfect canvas to start.
Heck yeah. Was there any particular reason you wanted to start with an Evo?
Well, it just kind of ended up being the chassis that I settled into, and by the time I was done with my 8, I had too much. I had too much as far as knowledge and spares and all of that. It's like I don't want to switch chassis at this point. Yeah. Now I came from DSMs. The first car that I actually owned myself, that wasn't a hand-me-down from my parents, that was still registered to them, was a 2G DSM.
Oh, nice.
And yep, 96 Talon, all-wheel drive, white on black, good-looking car. And I never really got very far with it from a performance standpoint. It was, at the time I picked it up, I was working at a gas station, and so it was just enough to keep it running, and so as things would break, I would upgrade them. So, sunk the bearing on the T25 and threw a 16G on it, and eventually got a front mount intercooler, and it probably didn't make any more than like low 200s to the wheel, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. I did some autocross with it. And,
good deal.
And eventually got to a point where I was making more money and was starting to look at replacing it. And I actually went and test drove. I'm going to make people mad. I went and test drove an 06 STI first. And I'm like, I want to make sure that I know what's on the table for, the other side of the coin. Mm-hmm. And so I went and I drove this car. And I don't know if you've ever driven a more modern Subaru, but they're drive-by-wire. And, some of the suspension geometry doesn't lead toward there being a ton of steering feel. And just overall, out of the box, I was like, trying to convince myself to like certain things or accept certain things about the way that it drove. And I'm just like, well, it's a more modern car. It's not going to drive like an older car. Like, I was trying to convince myself. Mm-hmm. And then, a week and a half later, it's this '03 Evo pops up at a local dealer, and so I show up there, and yeah, 3 blocks down the road, hadn't even got to an on ramp to actually rip the thing yet. 3 blocks down the road, I'm like, yep, this is it. I'm buying this. It feels like my DSM. It's communicative. It's raw. This is what a modern performance car should drive like, not the Subaru. And so I ended up buying that car, and it's been history ever since.
Nice. So, Charles, what is it about this car that really motivates you to want to keep pushing it and to keep trying out these new things to, like you said, get the extra inch to, kind of get an edge on the competition?
Well, at this point, I started out with Grid Life fairly successfully. 2016, I only ran 2 out of 3 events. As far as what was scored for championship, and missing that 3rd event kept me off the podium. But I was looking at times, and the season podium, but I'm looking at times, and I'm like, I could legitimately win a championship in this class. And then there was one additional kind of special stage, they called it, event that they threw in at the end of the year that wasn't part of the competition series. And I ended up setting at that event my first street all-wheel drive record. And like I didn't realize that like chasing records would be a thing for me, and at the time. And so at the podium ceremony, it's first place, Spaz, Charles Miller, I get called up, and they're like, and Adam Jabay, motorsport director for Grid Life, is reading off the time, and he's like, and I believe that's fast enough for a new street all-wheel drive record. And I'm like, what? That's a thing? And so that kind of lit the fire under me for 2017. And so that was the year that I decided we were actually going to start modifying the car. And so, that spring, did that 3-inch exhaust on it, threw a lower intercooler pipe at it, because those are the 2 big piping restrictions out of the box on an Evo. Threw crushed the blow-off valve, had it tuned at the class limitation, which for me has always been 25 psi. Other people, depending on how they've changed the rules, have had to jump around a bit, but on an Evo it's always been 25 pounds. So just had it tuned on 93 at 25, and at that point had replaced and upgraded the coilovers that the car had come on. And so went out and started at Mid-Ohio and won at Mid-Ohio, and then or actually no, I took second at Mid-Ohio, and then showed up to Midwest Fest and won at Midwest Fest, and just kind of dragged that out for the rest of the year. Had a frenemy at the time in a Subaru who decided he wanted to start like an actual like public level rivalry, and we got a bunch of attention on ourselves and on the class, and that's ADHD kicking in. So at the time, that class was actually called HPDE Plus. Grid Life was kind of treating it as a feeder class. But there were those of us who were trying to be somewhat serious in it, because it is the entry level of the sandbox. It is at the time it was a cheap way to get into time attack. But Grid Life didn't treat it as a serious class, and so this buddy of mine and I kind of hatched a plan where, if you're at all familiar with Gears and Gasoline, back then they were providing the general event coverage videos for Grid Life.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so we kind of hatched this plan, like we're going to be so ridiculous with our rivalry that they will be forced to pay attention to us. Because the problem was, if you went at an event And like, let's say as an example, this is a real world example, by the way. Let's say somebody like me walks up to the Exetti booth because I'm already running their product, and I'm just chatting them up, and and so they start asking questions like, hey, like, what did just are you running Time Attack? Yeah, I'm running Time Attack. Oh, what class you in? HPD plus. And then like the two guys at the booth just kind of glance at each other and they're like, but you said you're running Time Attack. And it's just, and then you have to explain that no, it is a Time Attack class. It's just the entry level one, and that's what they call it. But at that point, any momentum you had is just gone. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not good. It wasn't good for conversations with potential partner companies, and like having to explain it just kind of ruined it because because if you have to explain it to them, they know that they then have to explain it.
Kind of takes,
and that's just like they don't want to, and like companies don't want to have to put effort into like beyond a baseline into a partnership. They just don't. And so when you're at a point where you have to explain the class that somebody's racing in, when you're making posts congratulating them, it's just it doesn't look. It's a lot of effort, and it's people just aren't going to get it. And companies realize that, we as drivers realize that, and so we basically put together this plan. Like, we're going to put so much attention on this class, they're going to have to rename it. And so we ran the rest of the 2017 season, just upping the ante, putting like side bets on for things like signed dollars and shoeies out of the winner's shoe and that type of stuff, and just being absolutely ridiculous to the point where nobody could ignore us. And then the year after that, the class was renamed to Street Class. But over the course of 2017, I ended up winning enough to actually take home a Time Attack championship in what was then HPDE Plus.
Wow.
And so to circle back to the question, as a effectively national Time Attack champion, I want more than one championship. Once you've won one, then the logical next step is to win two. And I just have not been able to do that. Unfortunately, there was a long time there where budget was a problem for me, and I was just limping the program along year to year on driver mod. And there's plenty to be said for that, but at the end of the day, it's bringing home season trophies that have the numbers 2 and 3 on them is not as motivating as the ones that have the number 1 on them. And so at this point, it's I'd like to get back to a point where I can actually take home another championship or 2.
Yeah.
Or 3. And the other thing is that the only class records that I have left in my own car are ones that at tracks that Grid Life either doesn't race at anymore, or configurations on tracks that Grid Life doesn't run anymore. And so it's the only records I have left are untouchable records that I'm just always going to own because no one will ever be able to take them from me. And I want to start going back and taking back the records I did hold from the people who hold them now.
I like that plan.
Yeah, it's because it's one of those things in Time Attack. It's if you leave the weekend with a trophy that has the number 1 on it, that's great. You had a good weekend. You should be proud of yourself. But if you didn't also set a record that weekend, you're still not the fastest guy on the track. Now, it doesn't matter if you were the fastest that weekend. If you didn't take a record, something was left on the table. And so, yeah, it's the records that matter. It's the trophies are great, but the records are what matter. And so that's one of the things is I want to start taking those back.
And see, people say that time attack's not as competitive as wheel-to-wheel racing. Well, there you go, right there.
It definitely can be, but it's a completely different type of competitive. It's you're not out there, baring your teeth at a guy, flicking him off out the window, like all of that fun stuff. Who's like literally inches from your door. It's more of a and when I say things like that, it's all in fun. It's especially in grid life. You see those GLTC guys, they'll be sitting there in grid flicking each other off, and then as soon as the race is done, they're standing in paddock laughing and having a great time. Like it's all about the fun and the vibes, and it's just that's all shenanigans. There's no actual animosity going on out there, at least in grid life. But you get that in time attack too, but it's different because it's you're looking at you're looking at the clock. You're not looking directly at your competition. You're racing that aim solo display on your dash when you're out there, and then whatever somebody else does affects where you stand. But at the end of the day, you're racing that clock.
This episode of the MitsuTimes podcast is brought to you by MKS Motorsport. MKS Motorsport prides itself in producing quality, lasting parts for the StarQuest community. MKS has been a key player in the StarQuest community for over 13 years. Their parts are tested and proven to replace, outlast, and fit better than OEM. MKS parts are race proven and can be found on nearly all StarQuests on our StarQuest list. Find out more about their products and services at mksmotorsport.com. Well, Charles, a lot of people listening to this podcast are probably drag racers, and they're not as familiar with what you need to do in order to squeeze the most out of the Evo for these types of races. So I want to talk about the kinds of modifications and the tuning strategies that you employ to get the most out of the Evo for these time attack events.
Well, first and foremost, especially with the new format that Grid Life is running, reliability is a huge thing. It's your car performance is going to be fairly static from lap to lap outside of tires getting hot or shocks getting hot or anything like that. But at the end of the day, reliability's got to be a huge focus, because if you're tuning the car to the absolute edge of performance that you can get out of the engine, and running it for 10 seconds or less down a drag strip, that's one thing. But to take and just one straight at Road America, for an example, I'm rowing third, fourth, into fifth, uphill for a mile straight, and then I'm doing that lap after lap. It's a completely different level of how you need to set up the car in order to find success, because you're only going to find success through reliability. It's if you go out there, and you set a record off straight off the trailer, you're lucky. And if you can carry that same lap all the way to the podium at the end of the weekend, you are extremely lucky. But that's not going to be the normal. So at the end of the day, it's having a reliable car is the most important thing you can do. And it's everything that you do on a car. It's for road racing. It has to have its purpose in reducing the weakness in the car. It's you're not just looking at, does this improve performance? It's, does this also improve reliability? And if the answer is no, then you need to find a different way to improve performance, because it's if you're reducing reliability, you're reducing your chances at winning. And I realize that that's going to be the same with drag racing too. But it's a different type of it's a different type of reducing that weakness. Like tuning's a good example. It's you don't tune a time attack or a road race car in general for peak power. It's just not. I mean, it's nice to have a tune that you can use for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like flash a tune, crank it up, and just go for a Hail Mary lap. That's fine. But to run an entire, but if it's not your last session of the weekend, that's a bad idea. It's you need the car to last all the way through. So we tune for safety, especially running E85. I mean, you and the listeners know as well as I do that you're going to show up to an E85 pump, and what you get out of it is a roll of the dice.
Mm-hmm.
And there's unless you're ordering straight from VP or another fuel supplier, you're going to have variance. And so the most important thing you can do with the tune is account for that variance. So being that I've been on the stock ECU up to this point, we've just had things dialed back a bit, little bit more fuel, little bit less timing, just make sure that it's going to play nice with everything across the board. So it doesn't matter if I'm getting, E85 out of a pump or if I'm getting E65 out of a pump. I can put it in the car and it's going to turn laps and it's not going to burn itself down. Beyond that, the other big thing that we really do is we pay attention to data, and not just data off the ECU, but actual race telemetry data as far as what are we doing for speeds, minimum speeds in corners, maximum speeds on straights, where can I as a driver get more out of the car? Because anybody can spend a weekend lowering their lap times, but if you don't know where and how you're improving, you can't translate that improvement into consistency. And the consistency is what's going to make you a better driver. If you can turn near hero lap after near hero lap multiple laps in a row, you're going to have a better shot at that podium and that record than the guy who's just, out there driving by feel, not backing it with data, not learning, where their variances and lap times are coming from and how to reduce those. Long term, the guy who's using data is going to be the more successful driver. And it's not just, pulling speed and GPS data out of a telemetry box in the car. It's also using video. Both, it's if you use one or just use the other, you're missing out. You're not getting everything that you possibly could out of it. Great example. I had a struggle bus of a weekend at Lime Rock Park last year. Spent probably as much time working on the car as I spent driving it, and that didn't leave a ton of time for me to review data. So I would break open the laptop, pull files off the AIM, and just kind of review data and review data graphs, speed and G-forces and all of that, and just try to figure out where I can go faster. But I never took the time to sit down and go over video. And get home, start just kind of watching video back to debrief, decompress from the event, and immediately notice there's a corner that I'm leaving like a second on the table. And it's like it was instant, and it showed to me that I can't just sit there and if I only have a limited amount of time, I can't just focus on one-sided data. Yeah. And just it's got to be both. You have to use everything at your disposal in order to self-coach, in order to find where you as a driver are weak and figure out how to fix that. Because as I said, the guy who's just driving by feel, if you do that by all weekend, you may get lucky, but then it's just luck.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense when you compare it to drag racing, because that's sometimes you just need to get the car together to send it down the track for one pass, that may last 10 seconds or so. Whereas, like you're saying, you need to look at the entire practice or the entire past couple of laps that you made and make changes based off of that.
Right. And I mean, it's with drag racing too. You're still using data. You're still pulling wheel speeds and all of that. Mm-hmm. And once you really get up on the high end of things, and how can we tune this for less wheel spin off the line, and better. How can we make sure that once it digs, we're ramping in the boost right, and all of that fun stuff. And I've done a little bit of drag racing. I've dabbled enough. Dabbled enough to make myself dangerous to the car anyway. Back when the last event we had at Heartland Park before they closed down, they had a drag night, and so we were out there after everything had been shut down on the road course, and they were like, yeah, if you guys want to drag race, it's like it's like we'll since you're already here, we'll charge you like $20 and you can just run, because it was like a test and two night for them. Like, okay, so go out there, and I'm like, yeah, I've got a 200-mile T case in the car, I'm gonna be nice to it, and John's gonna kill me if he's listening. And so I get up to the line, and I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm just gonna shift normally, take it easy. And then the problem is I'm competitive, and so as soon as the bulbs are lit on the tree, I'm up on the two-step, and there's that little switch in your brain that just kind of goes flip. And I'm halfway down the track in fourth gear, and I realized I just flat shifted all of my gear changes. And it's like, okay, well, I guess that's just how tonight's gonna go. And so I ended up running like 3 or 4 more passes, and it's like, yep, I'm treating this as competition now, because that's how I roll.
It's not in me to take it easy.
No, it's not in me to take it easy. And it's like it just happens naturally. Like, if I'm gonna grab gears after launching the car, I have just I trained myself so long ago that I'm just in that mindset. Right foot just stays on the floor.
Yep.
It's like, all right, well, I guess that's just how we do things now.
Well, you think, all the parts that you've gone through and the different setups that you've had on it, you think if you could go back and start all over, you would still do this build the same, or would there be a more direct line to the setup you have now?
So, yes and no. If I had to go back, I'd be looking at it from the same budget constraints that I had all along. And the order that I did things would change in some instances. But the setup would settle to where it's at now. The one of the big things is I lost so much track time, and as a result lost effectively so much money, like hundreds of dollars in track time, to having issues with silicone couplers. And it's, if I could go back and do a setup with Vangeon clamps early, I would do it without skipping a beat. Like make that one of the earlier things on the build, and then I never have to worry about it. And we actually had an issue with the first ATS front diff that we had in the car. The original design on those differentials, the case itself, had some structural weaknesses that once you added the stressors of actually putting a car through its paces, you'd start to actually crack the case in spots, and eventually the case would just separate, and then it would basically go back to an open diff, because there's not any not any tension on the spring plates. And then you have all of these bits of diff that go through your T case and knock out your ring and pinion. So if I could go back and say either, going to use a different brand in the front just to make my life easy, or go back and say, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to keep running the RS front diff until after the date that they revise the case, and then make the switch. Either way, but it's pretty much all reliability stuff that I would go back and fix and just kind of change the order that things got done. I would also probably have gone to a standalone sooner just to get better safeties in place, since we started running things a little more toward the edge, and it didn't work out great for us. Wasn't really it wasn't really something that we would have caught ahead of time, but we had an injector failure toward the end of last season. That's why we're building a new engine. We ended up melting down cylinder 2, and so it's those type of things too. It's knowing what failures to look out for, and putting in some additional effort to prevent them, like cleaning injectors on a regular basis. And it's just going back and fixing the regrets more so than going back and doing things different.
Yeah, making big changes. I think a lot of people take the standalone safeties definitely for granted, because I think a lot of people think they don't need them until they go through an engine.
Oh, 100%. And it's because the factory ECU isn't going to tell me what cylinder I'm seeing knock on. I'm going to get that little Tefra slow knock flash, and if it's just knocking on one cylinder, and it's going to look like it's relatively normal and nothing to worry about. Well, it's when all of those knock counts are just on one cylinder that is something to worry about. And you just don't have the data to say, hey, something's wrong here. And so that's one of the big things we're looking forward to moving forward, is just being able to put more safeties in place, being able to run things like oil pressure and AFR and a proper AFR and all of that into the device that's controlling whether or not my engine explodes and costs me 15 grand again or not. Like, it's super important, and it's just not something that you think you need until you realize I needed that like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I would have saved a lot of money by spending that couple of grand.
Yep.
So, Charles, what is it about the Evo that seems to make it so good at this type of racing?
Well, to be honest, in street class, it's just the classing in general. It's these cars respond so much better to modification than most of what else can be shoehorned into the class. I mean, we're talking things like Subarus, Type Rs, all of that fun stuff. If it's a 4-cylinder with boost, this is the class it belongs in, and we just have a distinct advantage in the 4G63. And out of the box, the suspension geometry on an Evo is not terrible either. Once you start modifying it, then you really start having to fix things, especially once you start lowering it and you start losing some of the advantage that was built into the rear end. But overall, it's that's all fixable stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the just in general, the way that the car works together as an entire package out of the box is very advantageous, and the way that it responds to modification is just very advantageous. So once you start really pushing things and really coming into contact with the weaknesses, like the crankcase pressure issues that you run into with built engines. Then you start having to enact band-aids and spending a ton of money to get around odd weaknesses. Like the real answer is, if you want to fix the crankcase pressure, you have to go to a dry sump. Mm-hmm. It's the only option. But that's also not a good option on a street car. And so we've got Ben from Gears and Gasoline. If you or listeners have followed his build, he's got a catch can. I'll be using an air oil separator, but he's got a catch can that then has a scavenge pump running oil right back into the crankcase, and that's fixing all of the oil consumption issues that come with the crankcase pressure problems. And I'm going to have something similar. We ran into last year burning probably 3 quarts of oil in a vent. Now, when you have a 7-quart aftermarket pan, that's not as big of a deal, but like it's still something you have to be paying attention to, and having a fix for that implemented that other vehicles don't have to worry about. It adds weight, it adds complexity. It's not the most fun thing to be working on. Oh, what are you doing on your car today? Oh, I'm putting in a scavenge pump for my crankcase.
Yeah, that's one of the less glamorous parts.
Yeah, go figure. Block that was engineered back in the 1960s wasn't designed to alleviate boost level crankcase pressures. Weird.
Yep, who'd have thought? Well, if someone out there is listening, they have an Evo, maybe they're kind of getting fed up with the drag racing stuff, and they want to go out and try their hand at a circuit. What modifications should they start with to make their, transition into circuit racing, time attack style racing even better?
Well, best thing to do to start is just tires, brakes, fresh fluid, get the car out there. It's you want to start with as blank of a canvas as you can. And the reason for that is that it's all well and good to know how to drive a car on slicks with a ton of power in a straight line, and it takes its own skill set. It's not easy, and I don't mean to sound like I'm belittling it, because it's dancing a car down a drag strip with slicks that don't want to stick to the ground, slicks that don't want to stick to a prepped surface. It's you're dancing with a car in a straight line for a quarter mile. That takes a ton of driver, but it takes a different type of driver to get a car around a circuit fast. And so, if you want to make that jump, the best thing you can do is start with as blank a canvas as possible, with just proper prep, baseline prep. So making sure your brakes aren't going to fail and you end up with a car in the wall, or tires that are actually going to provide you with a good amount of grip, fluids that are nice and healthy. So when you have that traditional sustained right hand corner oil starvation that 4G63s love to do on a stock oil pan, that everything's going to go well, and you're going to be set up to have a good time. But beyond that, the goal needs to be learning the car, and more importantly, learning yourself as a driver. It's too often you see guys, I've never really been around a circuit, but I want to build this car for time attack, and so they tear this car down for years on end. Get it back together, big wings on it, crazy suspension, ton of power, and they've made all these changes and they don't even know what they're fixing. So the end goal is to take your time, take it slow, learn the car, learn you as a driver, and when you start to run into issues, spend enough time focusing on them while you're turning laps to figure out, is this something that's a weakness in the car, or is this something that I'm causing with something that I as a driver am doing? And just it's kind of a give and take thing. You work on yourself as a driver. When you discover weaknesses in the car, you start to work on those. And then once you've made those changes, you get back out there. You see if it's you see if you've got the improvements you're looking for. If not, rinse and repeat. And you just keep going, and you just keep going, slowly building yourself and the car up together. Because if you end up with a crazy built car, and the level of the car is, if the limit of the car is 100%, and you as a driver can only drive to 50% of the car's limit, you're not doing yourself any favors. Because at the end of the day, you as a driver are unconfident and in some cases afraid of what the limit of the car is, and that's going to limit your ability to learn and grow into the car. And so if you grow both yourself and the car together, that's going to be the biggest way to set yourself up for success. And I mean, there are people I've seen in the paddock, and I'm not going to name names or try to call out people specifically, but like, you'll see guys out there who have like $15,000 motorsport ABS and stability control setups under their dash. And then you watch their in-car video, and these guys are just like jerking the wheel around, sawing at it constantly. And it's like, that box isn't actually making them faster. It's just keeping the car on the wall. And that's the type of situation that you want to avoid. You want to get to a point where that box is part of your min-maxing, where it's, I'm having ABS issues into, corners under these situations, and if I could just alleviate those, I can go a little bit faster. That's when you spend the $15,000 on that motorsport setup. Yeah. It's not supposed to be a band-aid to get you faster lap times. It's supposed to work with you as a driver to get you faster lap times. And so it's you get these, you don't want to be band-aiding things. You want to be, it needs to be Legos. It's just a constant block on top of block on top of block in order to increase the level along with your own increase in driver ability.
Right.
And so yeah, it's an overbuilt, starting with an overbuilt car is never going to be a recipe for success. It's start small, work up. And are you going to be competitive when you start small? Absolutely not. Unless it's a brand new series that doesn't have a ton of people in it that have figured out the rule book top to bottom and are playing in every single possible gray area. Like if it's a mature series, yeah, you're not going to be competitive, and that's fine. It's talk to people in the paddock, learn from them. One of the big things in grid life is if you walk up to somebody with your laptop in hand and be like, hey, do you want to look at, or do you have time to look at my data with me? The answer from that person is probably going to be yes. We're more than happy. Most people in I would say most paddocks are more than happy to help people grow, especially beginners. Especially when you're new to the sport.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll help make sure you have a good time, because if you learn something and you drop a second or 2 seconds, or if it's something that applies to the entire track and you drop 5 seconds off your time as a beginner, you're going to leave with the biggest smile on your face, and you're going to come back hopeful that you can do that same thing again the next time. Yeah. It's if you're not having a good time, if you're not learning, if you're not going faster, yeah, that's not, you're not going to come back, and everybody in the paddock recognizes that people not coming back doesn't grow the sport. So yeah, it's all about figuring out ways to learn and figuring out ways to grow that are going to be the most supportive to you and your program.
Like, yeah. So I can't just jump into a grid life event though, right? Where do I need to start in order to make my way up there?
So you can. Now, Grid Life does, to a degree, vet their time attack entries. So there are going to be instances where if somebody is like brand new, like never been on track and has a time attack ticket, they're probably going to be shuffled over into Grid Life's HPDE program. But that's the nice thing. Grid Life does have an HPDE program. And so if you want to get involved with Grid Life, you or anyone, it's, especially if you're new to the track, show up, do beginner HPDE. They've got great coaches, and a lot of the coaches are GLTC drivers, time attack drivers. They're people who have a ton of experience and are more than happy to share that, just like everybody else in the paddock around you. And so, yeah, just the best thing you can do is get yourself on track. And, especially if you can do it with the organization that you want to run with long term, that's going to be the biggest thing you can do to help set yourself up for success. Because as soon as you start making friends in that paddock, you're going to have a bunch of resources that are going to help you grow, help you make decisions as far as modifying the car, and just in general help you go faster. And so, yeah, starting out with an HPDE program in Grid Life is a great way to get experience. And then as you work up through the ranks and into intermediate, into advanced, you'll start to build a good skill set that you can then take and transfer into time attack or into GLTC or into really wherever in motorsport that you want your journey to take you.
Okay. So it sounds like the best thing to do would be to start small on these HPDE. What is there something I can do to prepare even for that? What should I start doing, like lap days in my local track, or should I get into autocross? Maybe both.
Well, I mean, I'm a product of autocross, so I will absolutely say that autocross is a great place to start. It's the biggest benefit that you get with autocross is that it's accessible to anybody at any skill level, and the risk is low because you're literally like first, second, maybe third gear in a parking lot. And the issue is that autocross also has a good chance of building up some bad habits, specifically as far as inputs, where it teaches you to jerk the wheel more than it teaches you to be smooth. Now, granted, smoothness in autocross is going to be a huge boon, but when you're first starting out, and you're going through a cone course, it's tight, and you'll have a lot of quick inputs. It's not easy to learn to be smooth in a situation like that, or in an environment like that. And so, a lot of people, when they start out in autocross, they build up habits as far as jerky steering, and that doesn't translate well to a longer, more flowing course like a road course.
Okay. Like
even small road courses, your steering is going to be completely different than you're going to use in autocross. And so it's definitely something where you can start there, but it's worth being mindful that there are things that you are not going to be able to work on, as there are some baseline skills that you won't be able to work on as easily there. And so, yeah, I had to unlearn a ton of bad habits when I started driving on actual racetracks. But it's if you need a way to get into motorsport that's cheap and accessible and low cost on consumables and all of that, and it's autocross is great. I would 100% recommend autocross as a starting point, with the knowledge that you may have some things to unlearn by the time that you're ready to move on to the next level. And the other thing too is that as you're looking to move on, if it's not something where you already have your car and you're just working toward growing with a specific chassis, and if you're new and you're looking to pick something up, I mean, you can look at smaller budget classing too, like Grid Life Street Class. You're looking at tip of the spear being chassis plus modification $70,000+ right now. And unless you're able to develop in your own garage and completely build in your own garage. Like you're gonna be sinking a ton into a car just to basically go from a starting point to a competitive vehicle. Whereas you can look at a class like Sunday Cup, where it's like a very, very light modification of things like Honda Fits, Toyota Yaris, Mazda 2, all of that type of stuff, and your barrier to entry is, sub $15,000, like buying a chassis and being done. So there are cheap ways to get in as well, where you're not necessarily having to spend a bunch developing a car from the get-go.
Right. Okay. Well, what are your goals for 2024?
So my goals for 2024, well, at this point, get the car finished and actually get it out on a racetrack. But once we hit that goalpost, it's the big thing is that I've been saying to a number of people that I want the car to stop being a shitbox. There's a lot of things from like a maintenance perspective and cutting corners in order to get to the track and all of that perspective, where we've just been kind of limping the car along and just band-aids here, band-aids there, and those band-aids turn into permanent solutions, and that's not good for reliability. It's not good for longevity, and we just want to actually start putting effort into making the car fast and reliable, and just be able to show up to the track and have it be turnkey all weekend. That's the goal. And so with by the end of this year, I want to be at that car. I want to basically pull it out of storage for to start next year and have a car that's basically ready to go, and and a car that I don't have to constantly worry about, which for the past few seasons was not the situation we were in. So it's just you tow too many times across the country to just have some failure or another, and you're pushing the car back into the trailer halfway through the event and not having a good time, and spending a bunch of money not having a good time, and it just kind of gets to a point where it's you've got to start investing in reliability again, or it's you're just going to keep having a bad time over and over again, and it's
demoralizing.
You start to question whether or not it's worth it, and you don't want to be there.
Well, and plus, like you said, the more time you spend turning wrenches is less time you can spend looking at data. So
exactly, that's the other side of it, is that I can make myself faster if I don't have to worry about the car. Mm-hmm. And so just more thorough service, better maintenance, making sure that we're getting band-aids replaced with quality parts, and replacing things we've been limping along, and just starting to actually be able to document things as far as what are we going to do in the future, how can we implement this, because when you're not having to constantly fix the car, you can start to actually plan. And then of course once all of that, once that whole system and mindset and everything is in place and operating as it should, and just as stated, start looking back toward those top steps on the podium and track records and all of that fun stuff.
Getting back to having fun. So, Charles, what would you say are the long-term goals? Just to win all the championships?
Yeah, more records, more championships. Because as I said, individual trophies are nice, but I don't just want to be the fastest guy that weekend. I want to be the fastest guy.
Right.
So it's trophies, records, championships, all of that. I want more. I haven't had it enough. We'll maybe get there eventually, but for now it's more proof that I belong here.
More of more.
Yep.
So if we want to go out and see you in this car in action in 2024, what events do we need to attend?
Well, hopefully, as stated, Mid-Ohio here at the end of June. with Grid Life. Then Grid Life has a brand new festival this year at Road America at the end of July. We're super, super excited about that one. Car always gets along really, really well with Road America. So if you want to come hang out and see me on a good weekend where I'm enjoying myself, that's probably the one to be at. Otherwise, we have our what is our last scheduled Grid Life event at Audubon in Chicago in mid-September. And depending on how those three events go, I may end up throwing a fourth event in at Pit Race in October.
Okay.
But other than that, kind of just take things as they go. I do want to get some more testing time on the car this year since we're switching suspension setups, and that's the more seat time the better. So I might be looking at maybe renting out some track time of my own and grabbing some people to turn laps with me to help bring that cost down, and just do some private shakedown days and all of that fun stuff. And yeah, that's the hope. Whether we end up there or not remains to be seen, but
we're getting there though.
We're getting there.
Yeah. So where can people find and follow you on social media so they can see some more of this car and what races you're attending?
Well, the two places that I would recommend people check out on Instagram, I am CM Spaz. That is CMSPAZ. And then on YouTube, my channel is Spaz Attack. The actual user and custom URL is SpazAttack55 for the racing number. And that's a new channel for me. Just has one video up on it right now. Ended up parting ways with the shared channel that I was on before, but we're looking to post a ton of racing and garage content on there over the course of the year and the future moving forward. So,
well, good
place to check out.
Everybody, go give them a follow real quick. All right, Charles.
Like, sub, comment.
Yeah, there you go.
Click the bell icon. Had to do it. It was right there.
Yeah. No, that's a freebie. Charles, at the end, I always give people a chance to give a thanks or a shout out to anybody who's helped them out along the way, help them get their car where it is. Is there anybody that you want to give a thanks or a shout out to?
Oh, absolutely. Companies I'm currently working with: RS Motors, Motion Control Suspension; Evolve Autosport; Never Stanced, Race Tech, Frozen Rotors. That's all of those companies help bring some aspect of what I'm doing down in cost, or just make certain things attainable in the first place. And so I couldn't be where I'm at and do what I'm doing without them. And then, of course, the Rad Hangs Racing is the group of friends that I race with, and everybody that helps turn wrenches on the car, everybody that helps support me at the track, be it even the guys who literally just show up, sit in a camp chair all weekend, save for cooking food. It's one less thing I have to do. It's everybody who's ever tagged along to an event with me and helped me out, and even if it's just there to be my hype man, it's huge thanks. That's the type of stuff that drives me and keeps me going.
Good deal. Well, I want to say thanks for coming on here and sharing your story. I hope we can get some more people motivated into taking their Evo out racing, even if maybe. Like we said before, if you found out the cost of drag racing is too much for you, I want you to go out and do some circuit racing. Even if you kind of undecided where to take the car, go out and do some circuit racing and have some fun and feel what it feels like to take this car to the edge.
Oh, it's a good time.
Well, thanks again, and I can't wait to see this thing in action.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having it ready to go in the next couple weeks. Thanks again for the invite. It was a ton of fun.
Of course. All right. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Hopefully very soon, but we'll see how things go.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to the MitsuTimes podcast. Check out our Instagram and Facebook for daily updates. Get added to our list by going to MitsuTimes.org and clicking Submit a Slip. Thank you to all of our sponsors.